The oil filter adapter only exists to physically fit the 4-liter between the unibody rails of the Cherokee and Comanche. The other Jeep models of the era just thread the same oil filter directly onto the block because, unlike the XJ, their frames were designed with the 4-liter in mind. This adapter is host to 3 O-rings, and they leak notoriously. One way to prevent them from leaking is to delete the adapter. If they don't exist, they can't leak. There is risk in doing so, though. As you can see, I actually can't even fit a stock oil filter on here because it hits the engine mount. Obviously, with the engine jolting around and vibrating, even if I was able to squeeze this on here, it would puncture the oil filter over time. Apparently, I have heard with brand new engine mounts you can fit a stock filter right onto the block, but I don't want to chance that. The solution? We use a smaller oil filter, one with the same thread pitch and O-ring diameter, but a little thinner and shorter. I do warn, of course, that using a smaller oil filter comes at its own costs. It might not be quite as effective as a larger equivalent one. I don't really know the engineering principles of oil filters, but I'd assume that because AMC went through the effort of designing a filter adapter just for this one engine in these 2 vehicles, when they could have just used a slightly smaller filter from the factory, I bet they had their reasons for doing so. Deleting the filter adapter technically is a downgrade. The only upside is this thing is never going to leak again. As it happens, the oil filter for a 2007 through 2011 Wrangler JK with the 3.8-liter minivan engine shares the same thread pitch and O-ring diameter as the one for the 4-liter. It's just slightly smaller. Instead of using MOPAR 090, we'll use MOPAR 409 or an equivalent from this table. A main reason I'm comfortable doing this project is because the JK 3.8-liter shares the same 6-quart oil capacity as the 4-liter and actually operates with a higher range of oil pressure too. So there's no doubt this smaller filter should be able to handle the XJ engine. On the Renix models, it's probably more worth the time to swap a 91 Plus filter adapter on instead of trying to delete the factory one. This way you can use 91 Plus oil filters, which are much more common than the weird Renix thread pitch ones. To get the adapter off, a T60 Torx bit is required to fit between it and the frame rail, achieved by putting one of the sockets in a vise and pounding out the Torx bit part, and then sliding a wrench around that. This sucker is cranked on there tight. I have actually snapped a wrench prying on it before, so a cheater bar may be necessary if it's never been off. I've replaced these O-rings in this thing like 3 times now, so I don't put my entire body weight on it when I tighten it down. The thing is, once you get it off, it's honestly easier to just clean it up and put new O-rings in than it is to continue with the delete process.
Bye forever!
But like I said, I'm sick of this thing always leaking everywhere, so here's what I did. There's a dowel pin pressed into the engine block. I latched onto that with vice grips from the underside, and it took a while, but I was able to yank it out from above the upper control arm. Next, we need to get the threads for the filter itself out of the adapter and onto the engine block. I don't know what size this hex is, but I used a 26mm socket. I also have no idea how tight this goes, but I figured, tight enough to where it's not going to come off with an oil filter at a future service. Make sure to clean this mating surface best you can, because now it'll be responsible for sealing the oil filter directly. I've gone with an AutoZone STP 3614 filter for now. I also test fit an AC Delco PF53, and at the next oil change I'll put a MOPAR 409 on. There's a respectable amount of room for this smaller filter, which can now be removed from the underside, so that might make future oil changes a little easier. But this isn't really something I'd recommend doing. It's just a thing you can do if you're sick of the adapter leaking every 30,000 miles. Speaking of oil changes, you might remember in this video I tried this Rotella T6 diesel oil for the first time, and while I can't say I've noticed any tangible benefits, it does definitely hold oil pressure a little higher at all speeds. I can see how this would help a worn-out oil pump, but it didn't quiet down the lifter chatter at all, which is starting to get a little concerningly loud on this Jeep. Trinidad recommended this can of magic. I didn't even pour in the whole can, and this stuff instantly made the lifter shut up. They aren't kidding about those things wanting zinc, I guess.
goes the idle. It can't idle at 750. It has to, unless it's like heat soaked. If I shut the throttle farther than it wants to rest, it'll idle vaguely right. If I let go of it, it shoots up to 1,000. If I plug this, it idles right where it should.